In today's video, we're going to be talking about 5 different books that I wish I could reread for the first time. So these are obviously going to be some of my favorite books, probably of all time. And just talking about why I wish I could reread them. And obviously these are all going to be 5 stars because why would I want to read a non-5 star over again? So the very first, some of these are series, and when I talk about them, I'm talking about the entire series, just so you know. And that is such as the case with the first one. And I know that this series slash author is quite, what's the word? Controversial right now. But I'm talking about J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter. I am a person that is able to separate the artist from the art. I don't particularly like J.K. Rowling, and I don't agree with anything she says. And I think that it is honestly a travesty that somebody with so much power and a woman with so much power and an author with so much power is choosing to use it in such a disgusting way to spread hate around. But I digress. That's not what we're getting into. But Harry Potter is the series that I would love to reread for the first time. My dog's walking around, you guys. And I think the reason why obviously is the magic and the fun of it all, but also just remembering how it was when I grew up. Like when I think about my first time reading Harry Potter, I think it came out when I was in grade 6 or 7. So I was reading it like in my middle school years and going into high school. And that was I just have such fond memories of that time, and reading that, it was such a good experience. And I remember staying up late reading with a flashlight, way too late at night, reading these books because I could not put them down, and they made me fall in love with reading more. And I just could escape, right? You know, when you're that age and you're going through so many different changes in your life, and it's an escape. And that's what that world was for me. And I just fell in love with it, and I couldn't wait to get my hands on that next book. And like, you know, I was growing up reading them when we were waiting for the next book to come out. And whereas nowadays, you know, like, I mean, could just have them all, right? But like, I had to wait for that next book. I was in that age range, and it was just like pure magic. It was just everything. So I would love to be able to go back and reread the Harry Potter series for the first time and just get those nostalgic feelings and just experiencing that for the first time. And this was the first time that there was, you know, such a series quite like that was so popular. I mean, we had the Chronicles of Narnia too, which were also, you know, a fantasy series for kids, but this was just something else. This just took on a whole new level, and we've not seen that really before or since, you know. I mean, like the Lord of the Rings was, but this just took on such a whole new level, and I don't know if we've really seen something like that since, you know. So anyway, so that's the first one, and that's probably kind of an obvious one. One that might not be quite so obvious is a book that I don't really talk about on here very often, which is kind of weird because I consider this to be my favorite horror novel of all time, and that is The Witching Hour by Anne Rice. My baby has ripped my book jacket for it. But I first read this when I was, I think, 16, maybe 17, and I remember going with a few of my friends, and a new Value Village, which is a secondhand store in our town or in our city, just opened up, and it was like their grand opening or something like that, and they were having this huge sale, and it was on our lunch break at school, and me and a few of my friends went to this thrift store to go see what there was, and I found this book there. And this was like the biggest book that I'd ever read up until that time, and it was probably too adult for me a little bit because it took me a really long time to get through. And I remember going like months in between reading it. Like I would read a few chapters, and it was just like really, it was hard for me to get through, but I still was enjoying it. And I remember reading this in my parents' haunted house, my mom's haunted house, because my mom's house is haunted. I have a lot of stories I could tell you guys about that house. But my room was in the basement. I remember like reading this in a truly haunted house and being like spooked out, right? And just, I mean, this book is, the entity in this book is just so much more than just like a demonic spirit, right? Like there's just so much going on in this story. And a lot of it I didn't even really understand or get until I reread it again in my adulthood. Sorry, you guys, my dog's running around and probably trying to run into you guys. So, but I do wish that I could go back and reread this one again for the first time, because it did give me, like, it was my first time reading adult horror and just like truly getting something out of that and realizing how much I loved it, and looking, and after I was finished it, looking for more titles like this. And at the time they didn't have Goodreads or anything like that, so I didn't even know that this was part of a series until I was an adult and I reread it for the first time. And then I can't remember how I found out that there was 2 more books in this series, but that was just so exciting to me because I had read this and I had considered this to be like my favorite horror. And then finding out that there was 2 more books in the series, I was so excited because it's just, you know, the first horror book that you ever fall in love with. A lot of people have that experience with Stephen King. Mine was with Anne Rice. So the next book that we're going to talk about is by Stephanie Garber, and that is Caraval. And this is the entire series. I wish that I could just go ahead and reread because they were so much fun. And that also includes the Once Upon a Broken Heart spinoff. Okay. I want to just go back and reread all of them for the first time. And I remember specifically the 3rd book in this series, Finale. I loved it so much. It was my favorite book in the series. And I remember shortly after I had finished it, I had a friend that was picking it up. And I remember saying to her specifically, I am so jealous that you are reading that for the first time, because I just finished it and I wish I could go back and reread it for the first time. This is a series that is basically about a traveling carnival that is magical, and there's like really high stakes. And it's about these 2 sisters that kind of lose each other at this carnival, and they have to find each other again. And that's like really dumbing it down, but just the magical elements in this. It's also a love story. It's a story about sisterhood and friendship and doing whatever you possibly can do to save your family, your sisters, those that you love. But it's also a love story about trusting and, you know, believing in love and believing that love can help save you, right? And this is such a magical story, and especially the way that it's written. Like, she just uses so many different descriptors without it being overly descriptive. Even the way she used smells to kind of invoke just a feeling of being at this carnival, this magical place. It's just really cool, and it, once again, kind of sort of the same feeling as the Harry Potter. It's just escapism, right? It's just a beautiful story. It's a beautiful series, and the spin-off series from it is just as good. So yeah, this one definitely. Okay, so next, of course, we are going to talk about Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky, and this one I've talked about on here ad nauseum by this point. But this is a thriller basically involving a little boy that goes missing in the woods for a week, and when he comes back, he has made an imaginary friend in the woods who might not be so imaginary, and things start to go weird around him. He has changed when he comes back. He is like a completely different kid. There's something weird about him. Something's going on, and it has to do with this imaginary friend and this world that he was lost in for a week. So this one was really good. I've said this on here before. I believe this one is supposed to be set in modern times, but I read this as though it was set in the 80s, and I had so much fun with it reading it that way. So once again, I don't know if it actually was, but it sure felt like it was, and I just enjoyed it so much. It gave me nostalgic vibes because I was reading it as though it was set in the 80s. It gave me like nostalgic vibes, but also like spooky vibes because it's obviously creepy, and I really enjoyed this one. And the last book that we're going to talk about today is Tales from the Hinterland by Melissa Albert. And this is an accompanying novel to the Hazelwood series. And so that one basically is about a fairy tale land, basically. And it's about a girl whose mother has gone missing, and they have not spoken to her grandma in forever. She's never met her grandma, and her grandma is an author of these fairy tales that have kind of a cult following. Okay, and throughout those books, she comes to realize in searching for her mother that the world that her grandmother has created is actually true. Like there actually is this real hinterland where these fairy tales all take place, and these fairy tales are all real. And like, I mean, that's cool enough, but this is the accompanying book to that series, and this is the book of all the fairy tales. So throughout that series, I guess it's a duology. This book is referenced so many times, and this is the book that her grandmother wrote. So it has all of the dark fairy tales in it. And first of all, this book is really, really cool. Like even just like the illustrations, and there's a few illustrations in it, and even just the pages are like have cool like outlinings and stuff. The book is just absolutely gorgeous in itself. But these fairy tales are so beautiful. They're dark. They're very dark, some of them. And they're taking classic fairy tales and really twisting them. I mean, a lot of fairy tales, pretty much most fairy tales, the original versions are very dark to begin with, and they've been, tamed down by Disney. But these ones are just really, really beautiful. They're beautifully written, and everything about them I just absolutely loved. And this is my favorite book out of the whole series. For good reason. They're really well done. Melissa Albert is a really good fairy tale writer. All right, you guys, so those were 5 books that I can recommend to you that I wish that I could reread for the first time. So if you're going to pick any of them up and it's going to be your first time reading them, I'm going to be jealous of you. Make sure you let me know down in the comments down below if you are going to pick any of them up for the first time. And also let me know if you'd like me to do another video like this, because there's definitely a lot more books that I would love to reread for the first time that I can share with you. So anyways, I hope you guys are having a wonderful day, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!